Welcome back to the New Equity Network show. I'm Michael Yorba, your host, and Jared Fabriello, our co-host here. All right, Jared, you brought in some guests in studio, Andy Montgomery, Mariann Montgomery. Bring them onto the show. Tell us a little bit about them. And then, Mariann and Andy, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Good morning.
All right. Introduce us, will you?
Sure. So Andy and I are fellow Rotarians, and Andy and his wife, Mariann, have been engaged in the brokering of businesses here in the local Dallas area. And I thought it'd be great to get them onto the show to sort of help us walk through some of the best practices for people who are interested in selling their business or really in just cleaning up their businesses and making them run better.
Great. Andy, if you could give us just a little background on you, and then Mariann, we'll move on to you, and then we'll talk about your business.
Okay. I am a degreed mechanical engineer from Oklahoma State University. Been in Dallas for about 30 years, much of that time in the wireless data communications industry, and transitioned into business brokerage a couple of years ago after Mariann and I bought our franchise of Murphy Business and Financial Corporation that we bought over 5 years ago.
Great. And I understand the business is very successful. Congratulations. Mariann, how about you?
Well, I grew up on a farm and ranch about 150 miles west of here. Went to A&M and received 2 degrees from A&M. Spent approximately 6 years in production agriculture, then moved on to working for a family company that was in animal health, pharmaceuticals, and agricultural distribution of chemicals. And that's where I started really learning about a business. I worked up in that business and became the right hand of the business owner. And he ended up selling to ConAgra, and I stayed on there and ran a regional division for them. And they stayed in that business for about 5 years and ended up selling. And I went on to telecommunications, where I ran operations division here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Then it became my former boss from ConAgra continued to, communicate with me through the years. And he says, I think you'd be good in business brokerage and working with business owners. So that's when Andy and I made the decision to buy the Murphy franchise over 5 years ago.
All right. I was just going to ask you that, but thanks for bringing that out. Now, we're going to start off the conversation with best practices so that we can kind of give the listening audience a flavor for what you're doing and how you help them, through this transition when they're either trying a merger or they're trying, just a straight sale. So, Jared, do you have any questions about best practices here on this segment?
Well, I'd say, Mariann, Andy, what are the top 5 to 10 things that any company can do to sort of make them look better for sale or make them a more attractive merger or acquisition target?
Well, Jared, that's an excellent question, because whenever we're working with business owners, we really are able to get to see and learn about their business and their, them personally. But there's 8 core areas in a business that a business owner needs to look at and really focus on in planning for the sale of their business. And the number one area that we see that business owners don't spend enough attention at, whether it be a small business or a very large business, and that's with their financials. They need good, clean books and records. And if it's a larger business, they need to be audited financials. And that's an area that business owners do not spend enough time in. The second area I would say would be that having a strong management team. A lot of times what we see when we're working with business owners is the value is with the business owner. And they've not spent enough time building a very strong management team who has experience and also has the relationships, not only with the customers, but also with the vendors and also with the employee relationships. And I think the third area that would come in as a high priority area is systems and processes, where businesses have not spent the time to have them written, where they're organized and efficient, having a good process flow, and where there's procedures that are in place and that they're reviewed and that all people within the business know these processes, because a lot of times these processes are in people's minds. I mean, they're not written. So a business can become very efficient very quickly by just following that. So that's kind of the top 3 of 8 things that we see.
Great. Thank you for that. So in terms of timing, when should a company get started with some of these processes? How long does it take to implement? Can you go into that just a little bit?
Yes. Business owners don't realize how much time is involved in actually selling their business. They kind of relate it to kind of real estate and selling a house. But it actually can take up to 3.5 years or more to get your business ready to sell. And the way that's kind of broke out is just preparing the business can take 6 months to a year. And then building value and also working on your tax planning, that can take a year to do that. Completing the transaction once you've are working with a business broker or an M&A professional. And then generally the buyers or the new owners are going to expect you to stay on for a time period, and that could be a year. So the time does add up. So it can, I would say anywhere from 2 to 3.5 years, business owners need to really think about that time in actually getting their business ready and sold and then transition it.
All right. Well, you had mentioned earlier in our conversation when we were in the studio talking, that's really a seller's market. And I want to talk about market trends, but being it's a seller's market, is there any particular sector that you're seeing right now that's hotter than others? You know, the types of businesses you guys work with, small, medium, large, and what market sectors you're seeing the most activity in right now?
It's extremely generic, the calls that we get for the same things all the time. Typical profile is for somebody who's looking for a company that's $500,000 to $2 million in EBITDA. They're in manufacturing, distribution, energy-associated businesses, all those kinds of inquiries we get, as if we have a great business like that has a management team in place and they can jump right in and get on that cash flow, and we just can't sell it. You know, that is not the case. We have a lot of buyers that are out there looking for the same thing. Okay.
No particular sector. They're just talking about what's the cash flow here that I can buy into. Is that it?
Largely.
Wow. So it's okay. I just wanted to find that out. All right. Now, you say it's a seller's market, and that is music to a lot of people who own businesses and they want to sell them. Why is that we're seeing now a seller's market coming from your perspective? Either one of you.
Well, I think that, for one thing, people expect and anticipate a baby boomer wave of businesses coming to market. Mm-hmm. And that hasn't happened yet. We haven't been seeing that. I think to some extent it was a product of the recession that occurred in 2007, 2008 timeframe. The entities lost a lot of value during that time, and they needed to build back up. And they've accomplished that. The ones that changed their business model and recognized that things had changed a lot, they are making a comeback, and they're producing good cash flow now, and they're kind of enjoying it. So they aren't really ready to exit while they're making more money than they have in a long time.
But is that the time when they should be exiting, or considering it?
Certainly. Everybody wants to time the wave.
Right.
And they don't recognize just how difficult that is because of the long transition that Mariann was describing earlier. The message that we want to get out is whether or not you're planning to exit, the same things that you would do as if you were going to sell your business are great things to do anyway, because they can improve your quality of life and separate you from the business so that it will be easier to sell when the time is ready.
All right. Well, let's do this. Let's take a break. Jared was about to ask about a battery of questions, but before we go, please contact information so that people can prepare themselves for the exit strategy they need on the way out.
Our telephone number is 214-751-3901, and you can find us on the web at www.montgomery-murphy.com.
Perfect. All right, we'll be right back on the other side of this break with Andy and Mariann Montgomery. We'll be right back. You've been listening to the New Equity Network Show with Michael Yorba and Jared Fabriello.